Hi, I'm Mindy Tate, Executive Director of Franklin Tomorrow, and welcome to our monthly Frank Talks presented by Williamson Medical Center and Renaissance Bank, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But I want to give Dr. Darrell Lampley, the dean here at this campus, to have a minute to welcome us and tell us what's going on here at Columbia State right now.
Good morning. I can't tell you how this warms my heart to have people back on campus. Thank you so much for staging this event here with us today. Columbia State has a little bit of a downfall in enrollment due to COVID this year, and you can see that we're in a virtual environment primarily. We don't have many students back on campus, but we're going to persevere, and this will be over one day, and we'll be crowded as ever. So the enrollment for the college is about 5,500 currently, and we were at about 6,000 even last year. So that gives you some idea of what's going on. So there's a lot of factors. But we expect to come out of this in a positive manner. In fact, we have a new building that's going to start. Building 4 will be a continuation of the U shape that we have here. And at the end of the day, we think that we'll probably add another 600 to 700 students to that for an enrollment when we get back to some type of normalcy on this campus of probably somewhere in the 3,000 range, which will make us about the same size enrollment as the Columbia main campus. So not to take up a lot of your time, thank you for coming. You're welcome to come at any time, and we're happy to give tours and to show you what Columbia State's all about.
Thank you, Dr. Lampley, and it is good to be back here at Columbia State. This has been a place that, as you know, Frank Talks is a monthly event for us, held on the second Monday of the month, and prior to the COVID situation, we rotated this, and we're in different areas of the city here, West Haven, as well as downtown Franklin and other locations. So we're always looking to be out in our community, and it's great to be back at Columbia State. And I got my morning workout by coming up from the parking garage. I assure you that was a morning workout for all of us. So we are trying to Zoom today as well, and this is a fun way to do it. We had a lot of people who contacted us over the weekend and asked if we could set up Zoom, so we have done that. So there'll be some different ways that we're kind of administering this today a little bit. But I did want to introduce our sponsors, and I can advance my program. Wow, look at that. So thank you again to Williamson Medical Center and Renaissance Bank. Diane LeBlanc is here from Renaissance Bank. Do you just want to stand and say hi? And our friends from Williamson Medical Center could not be here with us today, but they do have a video that will play.
We had just dropped a patient off at Williamson, returning to our zone in Nolensville, and I got a call from my mother.
I knew I was feeling funny. I was talking to my wife, and as I find out, I'm making no sense at all.
She said, well, we've taken his blood pressure. It's about 70/40. He's really confused. We showed up at the house, verified his blood pressure is very low. He's really pale. He's tachycardic, definitely in shock.
I was in the ambulance and still thinking, this is not that big a deal, until the doors opened and then somebody came with a unit of blood.
As soon as we administered the blood, he became non-critical. And it definitely turned him around real quick, that you could see like his color came back, his vitals stabilized, his heart rate came down, blood pressure came back up. Definitely did save his life.
We are the only department in Tennessee that if you call 911, we'll provide the blood to you at your home, on the side of the road, wherever you need us. We're really proud to be the ones that kind of got this started in Tennessee. We believe we're making differences in people's lives.
Administering blood in the right clinical setting is what's key here. You don't want to be administering blood to patients who do not need blood. We keep very tight scrutiny over the the refrigeration of the blood and the preparation of the blood, the cooling process and the monitoring of the blood in the field to make sure that it meets all the standards required by the hospital.
We have packed red blood cells that are both O negative and O positive, and also we carry liquid plasma. So we carry those products in one of our supervisor vehicles, and it can respond anywhere in Williamson County, anytime, 24/7, to deliver those products to a field provider that has determined they need those for administration to a patient.
The types of cases that we see as far as that indicate that blood loss, like you mentioned, trauma, you also have the GI bleeds. Those are quite frequent. You also have potential blood loss with the peripartum patients, the pregnancy complications, those kinds of things.
So the training is intense, and it should be. The training involves a multitude of different scenarios, case studies, the pathophysiology of the blood products, the answering the why we need to give these products to the patients. It means so much to us to be able to have the opportunity to take this leap in steps for our state, not only the community, but we're leading the trend for the state. And we have multiple different departments around the serving area that are looking to us to be the primary example because we set the bar high.
I don't know that I would have made it. I believe it bought me the time I needed to get to the hospital.
If blood is the answer, having it and the ability to administer it in the field at that time can be critical. And we've had several cases where it's clearly been the difference between life and death. It's been the difference between somebody making it to the hospital alive or not.
Thank you to Williamson Medical Center and Renaissance Bank. So, many of you participated with us earlier this year in our Civic Index, which was conducted in April and May at locations across the community. We admit we were probably a month early in trying to bring everybody back together, and even in outdoor settings, and in late April and May when the temperature decided to be 40 degrees in the morning. That was really fun as well. That really kind of limited that a little bit. But we were doing this as a follow-up using the National Civic League's Civic Index program. Many of you know Franklin was selected as an All-America City, one of only 10 in the country, by the National Civic League in 2020. And we're proud to be the city's partner in pursuing that for the civic engagement component, as well as working with the city to highlight the work done through the Fuller story. And we are pleased to see so much going forward. So we had several hundred people participate in our Civic Index conversations across the community. And we used an online self-assessment tool that helped you measure the 7 components about civic capital. There are 7 components of civic capital. And those 7 components are engaged residents, inclusive community leadership, collaborative institutions, embracing diversity and equity, authentic communication, culture of engagement, and shared vision. And what you were asked to do was to look at those 7 components and tell us whether this is a strength for us, this is a moderate strength, this is a challenge for us, or we don't have this in our community. And so in measuring those 7 components, each person was also asked then to look and answer different questions in the survey. Key findings from that survey were that Franklin has a strong sense of civic pride and community pride, and I think you all feel that if you live in our community. Many of you are so happy to tell people that you're from Franklin, Tennessee. 10 years ago, we might have said, well, I live outside of Nashville, but no longer. You say, I'm from Franklin, Tennessee, and people know where that is. Franklin is viewed, according to the respondents, as having many organizations bringing people together to resolve pressing conflicts and challenges. And we feel that Franklin Tomorrow is a part of that in our 20-year history in the community, but our mission is to engage the community, foster collaboration, and then advocate for a shared vision for the future of Franklin. And it's only through engagement and collaboration that we have an ability to advocate. So we do work with organizations like Williamson Inc., do work with organizations like the Heritage Foundation, our school systems, Columbia State, to have that collaborative organizations that can come together to look at pressing conflicts and challenges. Some of the things, these are highlights. They're not all positive, but neighborhood councils and community groups do not reflect the community's diversity. And we're just now learning the outcomes of the 2020 census and seeing how Franklin's diversity is changing and growing, and we're seeing growth in several sectors. And so we want to make sure that those community groups do reflect the community's diversity, but those individuals need to feel included and invited and engaged, and we have to all be responsible for doing that. Embracing diversity and equity are the biggest challenges that exist in our community. And I think, we are generally tend to be homogenous in our community, or the people you surround yourself may often look just like you, but reaching out and embracing diversity and equity and the ability to tell those stories and to bring those people forward and to the table is important. One of the biggest challenges appears to be getting immigrants, new residents, and underrepresented groups actively participating in community events and discussions. Part of that is sometimes those discussions are not held when people can participate. They are not held in a way that makes them accessible. In 2020, when Franklin and Mara early on went to use of Zoom and invested significantly in that, and we're thrilled to see our programs be accessed by different areas of time, and not just when we held them. We said last year, and we'll say it again, we probably were wasting people's time a little bit. To participate or to be engaged in our organization, prior to the pandemic, you had to come. We didn't have Zoom. We didn't have another way for you to engage. But in 2020, we did really, as I said, go heavy into use of Zoom, and we saw our social media channels grow. We added over 670 followers to our Facebook page in 2020, and we saw the use of our programs and the viewership of our programs multiply similarly. And so we're pleased by that, and we continue today to try to find ways that people can be engaged without having to participate in our programs. All of our programs are available on our YouTube channel. They're available on our Facebook or website as well. And we also try to send out that link to the more than 4,000 people on our mailing list after we have a program like this. And share it with your friends and neighbors as well. And new residents to Williamson County see more areas for improvement. Now, we wordsmithed that last line there a little bit. The consultant actually said, tend to be more hypercritical of the community. Well, we just wanted to say they see more areas for improvement. And sometimes it takes a while, as you know, if you've moved here from somewhere, to sort of adjust and to see and understand the way that things are done or how people interact with each other or the organizations that you want to be involved in and to get engaged in those. And we will be posting, these are the key findings from the survey. I could do this crazy thing, and I'm going to try it. So let me just check. Bob, you did a good job of putting that in there. What I'd like for you to see is that, as I said, we don't have this. This is a challenge for us. This is a moderate strength. This is a real strength. Certainly having, if you look at the third question, neighborhood councils and community groups, certainly having 60% of the people, or whatever that number adds up to, say it's a moderate strength, it's a real strength, is great. But having 40% say, we don't have this, or it's a challenge for us, is as big a weight and as big a measure to look at and study as it is to say, oh, this is a strength for us. So we have looked at all of these. Why do I get so loud when I'm over here? We've looked at all of these and are looking at how we'll move forward from here. Our next step is that of the couple hundred people who participated in the Civic Index with us, about 70 of those people said that they would be willing to participate in some focus groups. And so we're going to be working with Brand Metal later this year to hold those focus groups. But observed areas of priority, get newcomers engaged in Franklin. Well, we have a plan for that we'll be talking about maybe next month. And we're excited about that. And get immigrants and underrepresented groups to actively participate. Inclusivity is the biggest area of challenge. Develop leaders from all backgrounds, ages, and sectors. And the diversity of advisory board commissions to reflect the diversity of the community. One of the things on our table out there is 10 quick ways to get engaged in Franklin. And who's ever gone through one of the Citizens Government Academy or the Fire Academy, Police Academy? Great way to get engaged in the community. Go to a festival. Drew's back there. Go to a festival, right? Participate, meet someone, volunteer. There are many ways to get engaged. And what we're going to try to do in the next few months and over the next year is help newcomers find those ways by reaching out to them when they move here. And we're working with Vanderbilt Health and First Bank to have that program in place, hopefully starting next month. So we're excited about that. Let's see if I can get out of here now. Woo, yay. I got out of here. So you didn't come here probably to hear me say all that today, but I did want to update you because I do feel like it relates to why we have asked Summer Ali to be our speaker today. And Summer is a research professor of political science and law at Vanderbilt University, the founding president and CEO of Millions of Conversations, which I'm excited to hear more about, and co-chair of the Vanderbilt Project on Unity and American Democracy. She is an internationally known conflict resolution practitioner, and she's a recipient of the White House Fellows Impact Award and Vanderbilt University's Young Alumni Professional Achievement Award. Working at the intersection of national security, civil rights, and economic development, Ali served as White House Fellow in President Obama's administration and as Assistant Commissioner of International Affairs in Tennessee Governor Haslam's administration. And serving with her as co-chairs of the Vanderbilt Project on Unity and American Democracy are Governor Haslam and author John Meacham. And we are excited to have Summer here with us, and she's got a great story to tell, and I'm going to turn it over to her. She can have that microphone, or you can come here, whichever you prefer to do.
Come on up. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I actually did come here to hear you talk about that. I mean it. That was fantastic. And congratulations on being one of the top 10 American cities. And also in really just having a frank and open conversation about what's working and what our challenge is. And just by show of hands, how many people here love a challenge? Everybody. And that's what we're going to talk about today is the American way. And I think that, you know, as I was listening about the diversity component to just reflecting on that, as that's a challenge for y'all, I don't know any community that that's not a challenge for. And I think it's just something that we have to continuously work on and be committed to doing so. And that's in part what I'm going to talk a little bit about here today, is that how part, so that it feels organic and it doesn't feel forced, so that it feels communal and that it becomes us rather than something that some people would consider to be checking the box. So how do we actually do that? So by way of introduction, as was said, I work at the intersection of national security, economic development, and human rights. I oftentimes say it's really hard to realize national security without human rights. And it's really hard to realize human rights without economic development. And so they all really do come together. And as a lawyer and a mediator in this space, trying to navigate this current moment, which I think we're in a really tough time, if I'm being honest. I will tell you that I consider the depth and reasons for our polarization in this country today to be a national security concern. I really do. So it's not the fact that we are polarized, but rather the following three things. How we are polarized. How polarized are we? Around what fundamental issues are we polarized around? And how are we expressing disagreement around the issues we're polarized around? So just thinking about those three things, please keep those in mind as I continue on. So as a small town girl who grew up in Waverly, Tennessee, and just experienced the flood, I see some surprised faces. You should see your faces. Some of you just raised your eyebrows when I said that. You did not expect that coming, but I really did. I was born and raised in Waverly, Tennessee. And it was one of the reasons as I was sitting here listening to the report, and I was thinking about how important these community meetings are, because it really does get to the heart of the growth of a city. And so growing up in Waverly, Tennessee, and having just experienced the flood, what I'm witnessing right now, as I am up here at today, we're having an event at the Grand Ole Opry tonight. One of my colleagues has organized it. One of my friends from nursery school has organized it around Hometown Rising, is what it's called. And I was on the phone with her as I was coming over here. Right now we were on this friends group messaging with each other, and this is a group of us that grew up together. And what I'm witnessing in that hometown really gives me hope right now, because I'm seeing the rebuilding of my town with the resolve of the great American spirit. Determined, can do, humble, unified, and resourceful. Is everyone unified in Waverly all of a sudden around who they voted for? No, they're not. But is it getting in the way of working together right now? No, it's not. People are putting their political differences aside, and they're saying, what do we want our community to be? We just experienced one of the greatest disasters that this community has ever seen. And what are we going to do next? And why? Why is that? Because there's a common purpose driving the town to transcend whatever political divides exist. We, the people, is at the heart of it all. Always has been in this country, and it always will be. That is how our democracy works best. We work together to be our best selves and lead with a common purpose. So let us keep this in mind as we move through the next 15 minutes together. So I've been asked to really talk about the pathway to unity, our common purpose, our shared future, what are our common values. Let me take a second to say what unity does not mean. Contrary to popular belief, unity does not mean we all agree on everything and that we have no differences, and that polarization just does not exist. Rather, unity means we have consensus around how we have decided to mediate our differences by following positive norm-setting rules. I'm going to talk a little bit about those positive norm-setting rules in a moment, but it's through that definition that we remain, or rather even that we realize what it means to be a peaceful society in the 21st century, one that models human rights and democracy for the rest of the world through that definition. So how do we do that? You might now be thinking, okay, thanks, Professor Ali, but what does that nice, pretty definition mean in real life? Well, here's what it means. I'm going to give you an example of where we are now, and then I'm going to tell you how at Millions of Conversations we think we can fix it. So in many ways right now, we are seeing people as in a prism of friend versus enemy. Us versus them. You're either in the tent or you're outside of the tent. In some ways, people can think of this as tribalistic. Are you on my side or are you not? Yes or no? You hear that a lot. Yes or no? Answer me. In an aggressive tone, too. I see people nodding. You've heard this. Are you for wearing a mask or are you not? Are you for vaccines or are you not? It's this kind of like this, I mean, that is not a conversation, right? That is, that is the beginning of a conflict, not a conversation. So there's this erosion of trust between neighbors that has pushed us into this vortex of friend versus enemy. What side are you on? And in our own country, in the homeland, in America. So how did we get here? In Millions of Conversations, we have something called a negative norm setting cycle. And I'm going to walk you through that cycle. And our programming that we've designed is purposefully meant to disrupt that negative norm setting cycle that leads to friend versus enemy and replace it with a positive norm setting cycle that leads to peace, unity, productivity, and a shared future. So the negative norm setting cycle starts with the demonization of the other, labeling the other. Stupid, idiot, terrorist. Use the name you want to use. You demonize that other, create that group automatically. Are you in the group or are you out of the group? That pulses or builds or touches or brings up animosity against the other. That animosity leads to fear. People begin to fear the other. As they're fearing the other, they start blaming the other for economic ailments, for traffic. I've even seen this in Los Angeles, for example, somebody telling me the reason we have so much traffic are because of those illegal immigrants. And that language, listening to the language that people use too when they say the reason that something is happening because. That dehumanization of the other that takes place. That blame many times leads to anger. So you're getting angry against the other. I can't stand them. I'm mad at them. If they weren't here, this wouldn't be happening. You see how this is shifting? That's what's becoming from a peaceful community into a negatively charged community that then leads to, in many instances, hate. I hate them. And depending on what's going on communally and sometimes individually, people can self-radicalize or they can communally radicalize and become violent against the other. And they start justifying that violence. It's us or them. If I don't get them, they'll get me. That's how we end up in a tribalistic society. That's what we mean when we say we want to avoid tribalistic norms. So that's the gloom and doom. How do we disrupt it? So how do we get off that train? How do we get off that slippery slope and on a train that takes us to a happy place? It starts with listening to each other. It starts with pledging to listen. It's beginning to listen. One of the reasons we called this organization Millions of Conversations and not Millions of Voices is because we have enough voices, right? Go on Twitter right now. We are hearing lots of voices. Where there's this new thing called Clubhouse. Anybody heard of Clubhouse? I mean, just like we needed one more thing. I mean, if you go on Clubhouse, you can really hear millions of voices. It's like, the problem is not millions of having access to millions of voices. It's having a conversation with each other. Because you're hearing me right now, but I'm not yet in conversation with you. If I'm in conversation with you, you're responding, I'm listening, there's a back and forth. When we begin to do that in conversation, we start to humanize each other. You might not have had the same experience as me, but we're beginning to explore our experiences. Where is it I'm coming from? Where is it you're coming from? I'm really curious. That leads to empathy. What's it like to be in your shoes? What do you have going on? We're in the middle of a pandemic, for God's sake, right now. We're going through a lot. What is that like? You know, what did people go through this past weekend? What's going on in your lives? What's going on in my life? That empathy. I might not know what it's like to be in your shoes, but I want to listen. I want to hear. I want to understand. I want to connect because I care. I'm in community with you. As we go down that path, that leads to exploring common values. What do we have in common? What connects us? And being deliberate about that conversation and asking others to do that as well. As we begin to do that, naturally we start talking about, you just did it right now, a shared future. What does our future together look like? What do we want it to look like? What are the things based on our common values that we say we want to be together? And it's that commitment to a shared future that then we recommend the next step, which is a hard next step. It's not an easy one. But if we do it right, I think we'll experience a Renaissance period. And that's truth and reconciliation. We start talking about our past. We start talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. As we talk about the ugly, we also don't forget about the good. We talk about it, and we reconcile with it, and we walk forward together. And that's when we realize unity, because we've set positive norm setting, we've set rules to say, I'm not going to agree with you on everything, but we've decided how we're going to civilly discuss what it is we agree about and what it is we disagree about. And we're starting to trust each other. As a mediator right now, what I see and what I feel in the air is distrust. I see a lot of disinformation, I see a lot of misinformation, and I see this hyper suspicious and sensitive environment. And that's because there's a trust deficit. And as human beings, we've been here before. And when we get here, we have to relearn these positive norms that I would argue in many ways we learned after World War II. I'm going to come back to that at the end of the talk. So just for a second, because I mentioned it about Twitter and the social media piece to this, and Clint and I were in the back of the room and I were talking about this right before I came up here, and that is, propaganda is not new. Demonization of the other is not new. But what is new is the speed and how fast it's happening. And so the way we're communicating has changed. I worked at Homeland Security when I was a White House fellow. And one of the things I remembered, I'd never seen so much in so many ways before, but was the 24/7 news cycle and how we were having to react to it. It was too much, and we didn't yet have systems set up to be able to deal with it. And we were trying to figure it out. And here we are, we're still trying to figure it out. And I think we're in the fourth industrial revolution. I know we're in the fourth industrial revolution right now. And that has changed. The fourth industrial revolution means the speed of technological advancements is happening so fast that it's never happened this fast before. And so what we have to do is to think about, how do we counter the disinformation and the misinformation being spread that's leading to the demonization of the other, that's setting off that negative norm setting cycle? That's why we started Millions of Conversations. So Millions of Conversations that Clint in the back of the room helped me start 4 years ago was set up to bring Americans together to transcend divides and to bring Americans together around the digital public square and the physical public square that we all know, the town square, to explore common values for a shared future and to help us renew our social contract with each other, to help set up conversations around what we mean together when we say the word on the street of which this community college is located, liberty. What do we mean when we say liberty? What do we mean when we say justice? What do we mean when we say freedom, when we say equality, when we say family values, when we say honesty? The reason I'm bringing those up is because we did focus groups around this country, and we found that universally people on both sides of the aisle from different religious, ethnic, race, sexual orientation backgrounds agreed that those were universal American values. Those words were said. Now, if we had more time, and I know you're having these civic conversations, I'd say, what do those mean? Think about, as a community, what does it mean? When I watched, if I may say, the mask mandate conversation taking place, if you want to call it a conversation, but the debate taking place a couple of weeks ago here, there was a woman holding up a sign that said liberty. You remember that? you remember seeing that sign that said liberty? When I watched the tapes, I wondered, what does liberty mean to her? She really feels strongly about that word. What does she mean by it? What is it when people are resisting wearing masks? I think there's something more there. And I'm wondering too, getting at what is it, are people struggling with what does it mean to belong in America today? And are what we're really wanting to have a conversation around actually is not whether or not we wear masks, but is, do you feel like you belong in America today? And so I think that together we have to have that conversation through healthy dialogue, both in person and digitally, to realize a community we are proud of for the world to see, not to tear the threads that are holding us still together, but rather to make them stronger. And the best way to begin doing that is through dialogue and having these open and honest, frank conversations. So at Millions of Conversations, one of the things we've done over the past couple of years, we did some research, as I mentioned already, with the focus groups. We also have done other research over the past couple of years to think about how do we actually put this into action, into motion. And so one of the things that we've come up with is the pledge to listen. So we ask everybody to take the pledge to listen. It's sort of like the doors that open into the Millions of Conversations process. And that's on our website. The second is to engage in positive media messaging. So we found that there are people deliberately using toxic messages, both in this country and outside of this country, coming in to divide us. And people are being targeted. So one of the things we want to do at Millions of Conversations, and what we are doing, is hacking those algorithms and targeting the same people that are sympathetic and vulnerable to those toxic messages with positive norm-setting messages that bring people together. And we've tested those messages and those messengers and found that it is working. We tested this with people who, coming into the room, scored 8 out of 9 on a scale of 1 to 10 of being okay with putting Muslims in concentration camps if there was another terrorist attack, coming into the room to sit down to talk with us who we knew had been exposed to these Islamophobic messages and anti-Semitic messages and anti-other messages. We tested counter messaging and found that people, when they walked out of the room, didn't still hold those demonizing beliefs. And based on that research and other conversations we've had, we were like, positive messaging does work. You might have to do it 5 more times to reach that person for every negative encounter that they have, but it does work. And that is part of the solution. The next thing we have is something called the Conversationalist Series, which is every month we have a conversation and a topic where we bring people from different views together to talk about it, to model those conversations that we're saying, to model disagreement. Now there is a listening facilitators program where we train people on how to be listening facilitators. Themselves, we have a listening guide, but also not just being a listener in conversation, but being a listening facilitator so you can guide these conversations with groups of people. Because this is, as I mentioned again, this is a difficult time and people are trying to figure out their way. And then lastly, we have something called 3142, which might be a good partner for y'all, stands for the number of counties in America today. We're made up, this country, of 3,142 counties. And we believe that problem solving together, it's what's going to really help us transcend these divides. And so we're starting in Grundy County and then Humphreys County, would love to come here as well, in setting up a 3142 task force that helps people problem solve and realize some of those challenges and overcome some of those challenges that you all listed just a couple of minutes before I spoke. So I just want to end on emphasizing what we mean by a shared future. Again, a shared future means that for our country to move forward, we must move forward towards a future that includes everyone, leaving nobody behind. Our qualitative and quantitative research again shows that American values of hard work, family, freedom, community, and honesty are valued universally in our country by groups of every ethnicity, religion, and geographic location. That gives us hope. And if you start your approach towards local problem solving with the premise that it helps to unify efforts and cut through the noise of social media and politics, you'll find pretty quickly that you'll shift away from this friend versus enemy framework and onto a more neighborly one that's focused on problem solving. And I just wanted to make a note on that too, and to say, let's leave the national politics when we're trying to solve problems at the local level. Let's leave the national politics to the side. Thank you. I see someone's clapping. And you know, I mean, it's rarely productive to make local debate an extension of national political debates. People voted for who they voted for. And when you come into the room to talk about wanting more clean water, or if you need more police on the streets, or how to embolden your community college efforts, you probably don't need to bring into the conversation who everybody voted for or get hung up on that, because you're not doing anybody a service. And you know, we need to avoid local civic debates mimicking the hyperbole and dysfunction of Washington, D.C. I've been there. I've lived in Washington, D.C. I've had an office in Washington on and off for the past 14 years. And so to say, like, you know, I would say that the gridlock and entrepreneurial politics of Washington, it's failing our country. We need to model for Washington, D.C. what proper leadership looks like, what engagement looks like, and say, this is what we want. This is who we are. We, the people, know how to solve our problems. And when we begin to do that, we can then engage with Washington and say, we need the following things from you. We need the following things to work. And so when it comes election time, we have our list ready. And having worked for politicians at the federal level and the state level, I'll tell you, there's some politicians in the room, and they can probably tell you too, your best bargain, as a negotiator, your best bargaining power is going to be when the person is running for office and they're coming around seeking your vote. So the more organized you can be on that, the better off we're all going to be, including the politicians themselves. And I do want to open up for questions, but I wanted to end, and I told you I was going to come back to that period around World War II. I wanted to end on two quotes from Franklin Delano Roosevelt. One from 90 years ago, of where he said, "In these days of difficulty, we Americans everywhere must and shall choose the path of social justice, the path of faith, the path of hope, and the path of love towards our fellow man." He said that on October 2nd, 1932, almost 90 years ago. And then 80 years ago, 10 months before Pearl Harbor, he said, freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. That is the American way. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Summer. Thank you so much. And I am going to encourage you to go to the millionsofconversations.com website, millionsofconversations.com, and read the pledge to listen, and sign up to act in the pledge to listen. And I'm going to tell you what that pledge is. Our path toward a shared future. So I pledge to listen to others who hold different opinions, views, or beliefs. I will try to understand their reasons and their perspectives, and will respectfully express my own in return. I pledge to listen. Isn't that what we teach children? To listen? I'll try to understand, and then I will respectfully express my opinion in return. So we have some time for questions, and I have to gather all of everything and go sit down. Oh goodness, Bob, that's very loud. But I'm going to start by asking you a question. Just how can leaders in communities like ours begin to work toward more civil dialogue about our challenges and opportunities? How can they work toward more civil dialogue?
Sure, I think sequencing is important. So I really think that the first step needs to be getting to know each other. And there are different ways to do that, and that's not the end either. So if you know you're in disagreement, I would say that the first step is not to say, let's talk about why we disagree and how we disagree, but rather to explore what is some common ground. And to really start there. And because that's the sequencing piece, because as you begin, we go through this in our listening facilitators program too, because as you start to do that, people tend to, if they're on a 10 on that issue, they'll tend to calm down a little bit. And I also say, depending on what the issue is, if you can, have it in a not a large group setting. And if you are in a large group setting and you see it come up and it's heated, actually to say, I don't want to do more damage than has already been done, we might want to table this conversation for another time. I'm not avoiding it. It depends on the context of it, but I do want it to be constructive. Another thing I highly recommend is setting the ground rules. Is to say, like, this is how we're going to have a conversation that's productive. In my opinion, do you agree? And then that gets somebody in the mindset too. And then you can have, if let's say you're having these conversations and there are protesters outside. People, that's the American way too, is to protest. Protests, we sometimes we fear protests. Oh my God, people are protesting. But it's actually to not fear people protesting either. But just but to emphasize that protests in the country need to be peaceful. And then there are ways, I'll give you a very quick example. Somebody was protesting a meeting that I had with a public official, and I knew them, and they called me afterwards to apologize for protesting the meeting that I was having. And I told them there was no need to apologize. And they were surprised by that. I said, you clearly feel really strongly about your viewpoint, and you should express it. And you know what they said in response? I love you.
So, that's a good answer. I saw a question back here in the back. Christine, did you have?
Thanks so much for your presentation. It was awesome. But
Thank you.
I wanted to find out a little bit more about the 3142
Yeah.
and also about whether or not community leaders, people in this room, could take that class or
Yeah.
course or how to be facilitators.
Yeah, we would love that. Thank you for asking that question. Yes, so there's two things. So for anybody who's interested in becoming a listening facilitator, you can sign up on the website, and we do those monthly. And they are an hour and a half each. And so we don't do more than 20 people at a time. And so we can do a group like this, but then do breakout sessions. And we have other people at Millions of Conversations that do the trainings with me in those breakout sessions. And then 3142 I'm really excited about it. It's a 10-year plan, and because we have that's a lot of counties, 3,142, and we're starting here in Tennessee, and as I mentioned in Grundy County. If you're interested in, we have a toolkit. So if you're interested in having this in Williamson County, our first step is to partner with a local organization that's already on the ground that wants to do this work with us. And then is to identify 2 people who are going to be, who can commit 2 years, not full-time, but can commit 2 years to convening the task force. And then the first month of those 2 people is to identify, and there's a reason that we're doing it this way, but it is to identify 6 additional people to be on the task force to identify what is the problem that your community is going to work on. So, for example, for you, it might be diversity and inclusion. For example, I'm giving that based on what you should hear. And so it would be like, what are the metrics for success? If we work on this for 2 years, what are our metrics for success? And what are the other organizations that have resources that we might be able to pull in nationally and statewide to help us on this too? So then you begin to connect, and one of the keys is the task force itself needs to be diverse. So I can talk to you more about it, because I want to be conscious of time, but would love to do that.
So you talked a little bit, or we mentioned in our civic index analysis that we tend to be a bit homogenous, but as one of the fastest growing counties in the state of Tennessee, we're seeing that change a little bit, and we're seeing influx of individuals moving from even other parts of the country, and maybe that's not being accepted, or they're feeling pushed out. How can we bring people together and be respectful? And I guess that is part of the pledge to listen, for sure.
Yeah, it's a process. I mean, again, I think all of this is a process. And I think the people who are inviting them to the meetings is important too. So is the trust there? The message is important, and the messengers are important. And it takes time to build trust. And I think, but it's also human nature to want to belong and to find belonging in your home. And to want it to be a good place to live. And that's not just a Mr. Rogers kind of view of the world. I mean, it's just sort of like kind of common sense, quite frankly. And so I think people are going to be probably a little bit shy at first. There's also going to be power dynamics that exist that have to be navigated. And I think we have to have an honest conversation in every community about healthy power sharing dynamics. I fear right now, if there's something that I'm fearing, it's that we have a scarcity mindset rather than a growth mentality. So we need to Control Alt Delete that and move from scarcity to growth. Because that, if we do that, it's going to be a model for the world. And it's also, quite frankly, how the world sees America and how America sees itself. If you look and you ask other countries around the world, some of the largest well-performing countries, about what they admire about America, they'll say usually two things: the American spirit and innovation. We're innovative. So innovative can also mean entrepreneurial. And when you have an entrepreneurial mindset in a good way, it can be, I'm going to be thinking outside the box. I'm going to be thinking about, how do I solve this problem so that everybody wins?
That's great. One final question.
I'm just curious about the generational gap and what you see and how, because you see a lot of people in this audience shaking their head in agreement, but how do we bridge that gap between, which I know it's been a year, I'm sure our parents would say vice versa, but I see the divide greater than ever. So I just wondered what your point was.
It's a great question. I think the 3142 program gets at that. That's one of the reasons I'm so excited about it. And it's in part because if I'm able to take you through the toolkit at another time, you'll see how we represent the community, including people who don't automatically agree with you. It's built in so that you're not preaching to the choir. And so that there's a lot of ways to do that. And how do you then get people to join that program? I think that gets to the other question too, and that also gets to the people that you choose, those two people, they have to be people who are mediators, and they don't have to be professionally trained mediators, but their personalities have to be ones who they know how to bring people together, how to build consensus, how to talk, how to engage, how to work. And they then would go and sit down and have coffee with somebody, for example, and to say, like, I know you hold these views, and that's why I want to talk to you. because I think it's important for us. And then you start talking about that shared future. You start talking about that shared vision. And 9 times out of 10, when you ask that person if they'll work with you on that, they will say yes. But you have to be deliberate about it. And so when I've said that, sometimes people will say, why is the burden on me? And then I say, it's your choice. Do you want to lead or not? It's okay if you don't. But if you do want to be a leader, sometimes it does require stepping outside your own comfort zone and going over to where the person is, and being honest about where you want to go together. And so I think like honesty is the best approach too, because people are very suspicious right now too. Like, what are you trying to get me to do? What are you selling? What's your real agenda? So if you're just very upfront about it, and you've thought about that too, and you have that answer, people will respect you for it.
Thank you so much, Summer, for being with us this morning. I want to ask you one quick thing. You mentioned the concert tonight to help our neighbors in Waverly. What are some things that people can do, or how can they support the folks in Waverly as they go through this terrible time?
Thanks for asking that question. The United Way Foundation in Humphreys County is a great way, and also going to the concert tonight. And I think like if you've got time to volunteer on the weekends, there's, I would almost say there's 3 tiers, as in probably you see this in any community, but one of the schools have been destroyed. And so they're having to the elementary school has been condemned, as has the junior high. And so I would say education there's going to be a real need, there already is, in supporting the education institutions and teachers of Waverly. The second is the individuals who lost their homes or who are having to rebuild or having to do remediations. And the third is small businesses. And I'd actually probably add a fourth and say healthcare. But what gives me hope, again, is that Waverly is reimagining its future. Waverly has had my parents are doctors, and they practiced in Waverly for 40 years. And they went and we've watched the town go from one of the highest performing counties per capita income to a struggling one. And many rural areas didn't make it out of the Great Recession from 10 years ago, and Humphreys County is one of them. And so our hope is that this is a renaissance period that can potentially be a model for other rural areas.
And as you mentioned, the junior high was severely damaged, and Clayton Calicott, whose father Clint was our county executive for a number of years. Clayton is the principal of the junior high school. And so there are ways you can help, and we just would encourage you to be neighborly and to listen to others. We've got a few things just to go through real quickly. I just wanted to say these dates, or put these up here for you. We tomorrow and next week are offering Question, Persuade, and Refer suicide prevention training. Mental health in our communities is such an important thing, and if you're interested in learning more, please ask me. Franklin Amaro is partnering with Williamson Inc. and the Williamson County Association of Realtors, as well as the Williamson Herald, to present a city election candidate forum on the 27th at 5:30 p.m. at City Hall. Early voting is October 6th through the 21st in that city election. That will elect a majority of our Board of Mayor and Aldermen. We're not telling you how to vote, we're asking you to vote. There'll be 5 of 8 seats selected for that Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Our next Breakfast with the Mayors is October 19th. Election Day is October 26th. Our Mayor's Cup Golf Tournament, and the mayor just left, is October 27th. And November 16th are our 15th Annual Exemplary Community Volunteer Awards. There's still time to up your game in the Mayor's Cup with a whole sponsorship. And then this is really important to me, the 15th Annual Exemplary Community Volunteer Awards, November 16th at Rolling Hills Community Church. Think about what the last 18 months have been like, and certainly this year as we've come back out and emerged. Are there individuals or organizations which have excelled and made our lives better in Williamson County? awards the nominations are now open online at our website, franklintomorrow.org, and then go to events and you'll find this, or email me, mindy@franklintomorrow.org, and we'll send you the contact information. This is a great opportunity we will hopefully be able to do this in person this year. We did it remotely last year, but Tom Lawrence and I hopefully will be on stage and MC this event at Rolling Hills Community Church, and tickets will go on sale. This is one of the few events that we charge for, and really it's just because one of the great things about this program is that those who receive an award, we make a cash donation to the nonprofit organization of their choice. So making that expenditure, and that is usually ends up being about $5,000 with the awards given, is a huge thing. We'll also be honoring the lives of volunteers and community leaders that we lost in the past year in a really moving in memoriam section. So we hope you'll be with us, and look forward to seeing you next month. And that'll be in October, and we'll hopefully be back here at Columbia State for that event. But thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you at one of the many events that are coming up in the next month. So thanks. Have a great day.